your computer. Okay, so today's class is just going to be things that I'm seeing, and if you've been in my post-licensing class when I teach the RPA, it's 4 hours. This is not going to be 4 hours, but you're going to hear the same stories that I tell. So, and if you don't know who I am, I'm Janet Carpenter, and I'm the manager of our Summerlin office for the time being, which is moving. When? I don't know when. Where? I do know where, but not when. Okay, so RPA. So we're going to start with this. So the first thing, and this is very important, I know a lot of agents type everything up and then they just send it via email to the buyer to sign. But let me just tell you this. If you're doing that, you need to have your duties owed signed well in advance, because if your buyer is going through and they're clicking their signature on the duties owed, and then approximately 40 seconds later they click the signature on the RPA and the division asks for your file, you are in trouble. You are in big trouble, because the first thing they look at is the date and the time on the duties owed, and they compare it to the date and the time on the contract. And you better have had enough time between your buyer signing the two documents that the division can assume that you have very carefully explained everything in the document. So if you don't have that time gap, you're in trouble. So that's the first thing. Second thing, so you got your buyer, they're like, yes, this is the house, we want to write it. So what's the first thing you do? I'm sorry? Well, the first thing you should do really is call the other agent. Now, in this day and age, I know you might call and they don't answer, but the really good agents do answer. And I will tell you, once I had this couple who was moved corporate transfer from Memphis to Vegas, and they were very upset that they were leaving the heart of the Bible Belt and now they were coming to Sin City. So we finally found a beautiful one-story house in Summerlin that they liked, and so I called the listing agent and I said, I'm getting ready to write an offer on your property at whatever the address was. Is there anything I need to know? She said yes. And this was long before COVID and this current buying frenzy. And she said, my sellers have a mentally handicapped son. They've already bought their new house, but they would like a 2-week transition period just to take their son over to the house, get him used to being in the new house before they move out. So I explained all this very carefully to my buyers, and they said, no. When it closes, it's our house. I said, okay. So I was going to go present my own offer in person, and the listing agent called me back, and she said, just so you know, I have another offer on the property, and they are aware of your offer, and you may come and present to my sellers at 6. The other agent will present at 7, and we'll make a decision tonight. So I called my buyers. I said, there's another offer. Do you want to change anything on your offer? They said no. And I said, what about the 2 weeks? Because we're now in competition and they're aware that you've written an offer. They said no. Fine. So I went and presented my offer to the seller and the listing agent, and then I went and sat in the cold, dark car, because it was like January. I was freezing. And I'm sitting there in the dark, and the listing agent comes and knocks on my window and said, I'm so sorry, but my sellers accepted the other offer. I said, really? I said, we came in at list price, 20% down conventional loan, asking for nothing but a home warranty. She said, your offer and the other agent's offer were identical. Identical, except for one thing. The other people are going to allow the sellers to stay for 2 weeks with no rent. So always call and know what you're up against, because it may affect you, because price is not always the motivating thing, particularly if you're dealing with military people who are moving like in March or April. A lot of times the military spouse will move, but the other spouse will stay behind till the kids finish school. So price is not always important. It's like, we want to stay here till we have to move out. So always call and ask the other agent. And there's really nothing on here that's a big red flag. You know how to fill all this out. You should know how to fill this one out. The only thing I'm seeing is when you add up all that, can you, Ali, oh, she left. I don't know how to scroll. She's got the controls. When you add all these figures up, when you figured it in, it should come up to the sales price you have on line G and the sales price that you have written up at the top. And if you don't, there's usually one reason for that, and that's because you forgot to take the earnest deposit and subtract it from the balance of the down payment that they have to come in with. So don't forget that. And I don't know how to scroll up because the computer is at her desk and she's not there. Thank you, John.
Does anybody do the additional deposit? I had a buyer one time did it. We got the place.
Well, an additional deposit makes your offer look stronger. And a lot of times on high-end homes, they'll ask for really large deposits, like $30,000. We had one in the office. No, it wasn't in our office. It was Green Valley office, the $16 million condo that was sold. And the earnest deposit was $250,000. So here's the thing. If it's $10,000 or under and there's a dispute over the earnest deposit, you can go to small claims court without an attorney. If it's over $10,000, you're going to be going to district court with an attorney. So sometimes people will put down the $10,000 as an earnest deposit, and then they will put in additional monies. But if they know they have to come, because it says in section B that we've moved on from, that's not considered part of the EMD. That's one thing. But the second thing, like you talked about, if they put down the earnest deposit and they know they're coming in with an additional, $70,000 as a down payment, they can put extra money in on line B. And then if there is a dispute, something happens, that money's not held up because it's not considered part of the earnest money deposit.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Pardon?
Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. That does make your offer look stronger. Whoa, look at all the money they're coming in with. Okay, nothing really big on appraisal contingency or loan contingency or cash purchase. I want to go to fixtures and personal property.
Standard time frame for the appraisal period was the 20 days?
I talked to Shelley Panzarella from Prosperity Lending, and she said give us a minimum of 17 days. So 17 to 20 days is good for the appraisal contingency. Loan contingency, just a couple of days before your close of escrow date. Cash purchase, usually within 3 business days, they want to see proof of funds. Fixtures and personal property. Now this says fixtures and fittings included but not limited to electrical, mechanical, lighting, plumbing and heating, ceiling fans, fireplace, gas logs, grates, solar powers, built-in appliances, ranges, ovens, windows, door screens, awnings, shutters, window coverings, attached floor coverings, television antennas, satellite dishes, private integrated telephone systems, air cooler, conditioners, pool and spa equipment, garage door opener, remotes, mailbox, in-ground landscaping, water softener, water purifier, and security systems. There are three things that a lot of buyers ask for that are not included in this list. And what are those three things?
Refrigerator, washer, dryer.
You got it. Refrigerator, washer, and dryer. So even if you're looking at an MLS printout and it says refrigerator Y, which means yes, the seller's going to leave the refrigerator. And if it says washer Y, yes, I'm leaving my washer. Dryer Y, I'm leaving my dryer. Well, guess what? That MLS printout doesn't mean a thing. That is just an advertisement. This is the contract. So if they're leaving them, or even if they say they're not leaving them, and your buyer wants them, write in washer, dryer, and refrigerator. We've had a lot of cases where there's this beautiful French door stainless steel refrigerator in the kitchen, and the buyer asks for the refrigerator, and when they come for the walkthrough, they've got the lime green refrigerator that was in the garage. So you might want to specify what kind of refrigerator, washer, and dryer. Now, I will tell you this. I had an agent in my office who had some buyers from Chicago. The important thing to them is that they were moving themselves from Chicago to Vegas, and they did not want to hassle with bringing the refrigerator, the washer, the dryer. They just wanted to get a U-Haul and move. So they only looked at things where on the MLS printout it said refrigerator Y, dryer Y, washer Y. But because it was mentioned in the MLS printout, the buyer's agent did not write it in here. So they went to Chicago, they packed up everything they were bringing with them, and they came back to do the walkthrough. They go in, and guess what? There's no refrigerator, there's no washer, there's no dryer. So our buyer's agent calls the listing agent and said, where are the refrigerator, washer, and dryer? And you know what the listing agent said? Well, my seller was willing to leave them, but since you did not ask for them, he didn't think you wanted them, so he sold them. If you want the refrigerator, the washer, and dryer, write it in. And then if there's anything else the buyer wants that's not listed in there, write it in as additional personal property. I had a buyer one time moving from Ohio, and I knew this lady. I sold her condo. She was a licensed realtor in Ohio, and she moved out here, this is probably 15 years ago. And if I said her name, most of you would know her. She's a very successful realtor now. And so I violated my own rule. I did not call the listing agent and say, what do I need to know about your seller? I'm getting ready to write a contract. But on the patio, the sellers had the most beautiful, expensive, and lots of it, wicker furniture you have ever seen in your life. This was not Pier 1 stuff. This was expensive stuff. And so she says, oh, and right here, I want you to write down, I want all the wicker patio furniture. I said, they're not leaving that. She said, well, write it in. I said, do you know how expensive that is? And she said, yes, I do, and I want it. I want it. And I said, all right, I'm going to write it in, but you're not getting it. Just so you know, you're not getting it. I knew her, so I could talk to her that way. Well, what I didn't know, because I failed to call the listing agent, was these people were having a custom home built, and they just wanted to be sure their home was sold, and they were moving into an apartment, and they didn't want to pay for storage because they were going to get all new furniture, all new everything when they moved into their custom home. This was probably 15 years ago, and this person still has this furniture. She has recovered the cushions, but she still has it. So whatever they want, write it in. Now let me just tell you about smart home devices. There's supposed to be an attachment to the MLS printout that you can print out, look up in the right upper left-hand corner, and it should be there on smart home devices. Well, I will tell you, if you've looked at that attachment, it is so confusing. Most agents don't know how to fill it out. They don't know anything about it. Most people had the Geek Squad or whomever come put all their stuff in, and they just know how to control it by their phone, and that's all they know. So I will tell you, this form is in the process of being reworked. But if there's anything in there like a Nest thermostat, a Ring doorbell, whatever that you want, check that box. Okay, next page, Aaliyah. Persia, gosh. Well, they look so much alike.
Hey, Jeannie, turn the page.
Thank you. Okay, you all know how to open escrow. I will tell you the mistake that I am seeing here is on line 5 with Escrow Officer. We all have these very nice, helpful, friendly people from title companies that walk through our offices and bring us buyer guides and seller guides and all of that good stuff. And newer agents think this is the escrow people. No, this is not your escrow officer. This is the marketing rep for the title company that's coming through. So do not put the marketing rep's name in there as the escrow officer. Well, if you're new and you don't know a good escrow officer, that friendly person that comes through your office, the marketing rep, hopefully you've had a couple conversations with them and just say, hey, who do you think in your company would work with my personality, because I want to give your title company a try. And they'll recommend somebody to you. But this is the escrow officer and not the marketing rep. Okay, paragraph 7, buyer's due diligence. So here is 2 problems. One, selling agents are countering like 4 days due diligence, 5 days due diligence. I've seen it more than once. So due diligence is the time for you to have the home inspector come in, inspect the house, be sure they're satisfied that air traffic's not flying over their house 24 hours a day. Be sure, particularly in the school district, that they're getting the schools they thought they were going to, because Clark County is notorious for rezoning, particularly elementary schools, every year. So that's your time to check all of that out. But 2 things. One, if there is no power on, and it says in big bold print, seller's got to have all the utilities on, make your due diligence start 1 day after seller has turned on all utilities, because the home inspector can't inspect it if it's not there. The other thing too is the due diligence period now encompasses, used to it just was like, okay, I got 7 days, get the home inspector in here and decide if I want to go forward. Well, now technically you are supposed to send in your little form, buyer's request for repairs. It says, I want the following items repaired by a licensed contractor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the seller can come back and say, I'll do 1 through 4, but I'm not doing 5 and 6. And your buyer has to decide, can I live with that? Can I not live with that? Well, a due diligence period also includes that time period where you are in negotiations with the seller on what they're going to repair. So be sure you allow enough time and don't get bullied by a listing agent who says, I'm reducing the due diligence to 4 days. Any questions? Okay, can you scroll down, Persia, please? Okay, so if there are any problems and the seller says, I'm not fixing anything, and your buyer says, no, I want these things fixed, and the seller says no, then you need to cancel within the due diligence period. Cancel in writing to protect your buyer's EMD. Now, when this form was originally being worked on, LVR had an attorney on staff, and his big thing was no response from the seller is a response. So if you don't get a response prior to the expiration of your due diligence period, call the listing agent, see what's going on, and then if your buyer can't live with all the problems that he wanted corrected, cancel in writing. And this is so important that the buyers have to initial there.
You have till midnight to send the cancellation too, right now? If you're gonna send it, you said that has to be in by midnight that night?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, inspections. Now, I'm just going to go through this. Most people do this well, but I'm going to tell you, bear in mind everything is negotiable, particularly in this market. And I'm just going to tell you what's kind of standard and why it's standard. So energy audit. I don't know anybody that gets an energy audit. It must, you do? Oh, that's where you have somebody come out who has the certification, and they go through and they check the insulation in the home. They take infrared pictures to see if heat's escaping out the windows or the sliding glass door, or air conditioning's coming out, or if there's a zone of the house that's not being cooled. That's called an energy audit. So must have been maybe 4 legislative sessions ago, some legislator in their infinite wisdom decided at point of sale, every home in Nevada had to have an energy audit. And they brought that bill to the floor, and every home inspector in town went out and got certified to do energy audits. Well, can you imagine selling a home that was built in the 70s and having an energy audit and seeing everything escaping through the single pane windows or the sliding glass door that doesn't quite fit? But thanks to our lobbying team, Carrera Nevada, that bill was defeated before it came to a law. So we don't have to have energy audits. They're not inexpensive. So I would just put waived. Home inspection. Seller could care less if he has a home inspection, but the buyer needs to know what they're buying. So the buyer pays for that. Termite pest inspection. Okay, in Nevada, we're not required to have termite inspections unless your buyer's going on a VA loan. And if they are, then they must have a termite inspection and the seller must pay for it. The VA buyer can't pay for it. However, we have all these people moving over here from California. Leah.
What do you mean the buyer can't pay for it?
The VA buyer can't pay for it.
It's not permitted.
It's not permitted? What happens if they do pay for it?
I don't know. The VA says they can't pay for it.
Why does the buyer pay for it?
Well, let's just hope your file's never audited by the government. So yeah.
Should I call the lender?
Is it closed?
Not yet.
Oh yeah, I'd call the lender. They'll probably catch it. The lender will probably catch it. But anyway, so we have all these California buyers coming over here, and when you sell your house in California, most of the time they want their house tinted and whatever they do with a tint for termites. But don't ever say to a buyer, we don't have termites in Las Vegas, because that is not true.
There's a lot of plants that are coming up here too.
And all those people who are using bark in their landscaping beds and their gardens, when you bring in that bark, and in fact, I will tell you a true story. I was having a house built 20 years ago, and my husband and I were having a big fight about, he's from the Northwest, he wanted bark around the house. I'm like, No. But I paid a home inspector to come 4 times during the course of my construction, after hours, when nobody was on site, and check out the house. And so I said, we're going to ask the home inspector. So I asked the home inspector. I said, we're having this little disagreement. One of us wants bark and one wants rock. He said, don't use bark. It brings in termites. But I will tell you, there's a place that was built, I don't know, probably mid-70s, called Heritage Square. It's like between Tropicana and Flamingo and Pecos and whatever's north of Pecos, I don't remember. And it was a very nice townhome community. There were some 1-stories, there were some 2-stories, and they had bark all around, and it was old, and one of the 2-stories had their staircase eaten away by termites. Do not ever say we don't have termites, because we do. But ask your buyer, ask them, do you want a termite inspection? And they say, well, and in a newer home, they've treated the ground, they've treated the slab, everything's been kind of taken care of, but homes built in the 70s and 80s, not so much. So ask them. If they do, if they're not a VA buyer, they're paying for it. Roof inspection, this goes right along with a home inspection, and your home inspector will go up in the rafters. They'll use binoculars to check out the roof. Now most of them, you are using drones to fly over, but it's the same charge for the home inspection, the roof inspection. Septic lid removal, that's kind of touchy. If it has a septic tank, and how do you know that? You show up this beautiful 1-story house on a ½ acre, how do you know if it has a septic tank?
There'll be a well.
It's on the MLS, it'll tell you. And if it does, septic lid removal, well, I'm going to tell you, I've been licensed since '83, and in my entire real estate career, I've only sold 2 homes that had septic tanks. And in both cases, we asked the seller to pay for the lid removal. Well, in one we didn't, I take that back. One case we did. In the other case, they had just had their septic tank all cleaned out, pumped, everything prior to putting the home on the market, and they had the paperwork to prove it. So ask the listing agent, does your seller have any paperwork on the septic tank? So, survey. Generally, we don't get surveys because our boundaries of our property, for the most part, are marked by the block walls. Surveys are for big pieces of land, and whoever wants it's going to have to pay for it. Fungal contaminant inspection, that's mold. Now, when you do, generally speaking, you would put waived, but then down here it talks about if there are any areas of concern, you can have it further inspected when you do the home inspection. So, but a home inspector can't diagnose mold. They can say, this looks suspicious to me. You may want to have an expert check it out. Now, if the seller is still there and it has to be checked out, then I would change that and ask the seller to pay for it. Because who knows, they may have to drill holes, and as a buyer who hasn't closed, I don't want to be responsible for that. Mechanical inspection, that goes right along with a home inspection. Whatever turns on, off, flushes, runs, needs to be in working condition. Pool spa inspection, your home inspectors are all certified to do that, so the buyer's paying for that because it's right in the cost of the home inspection. Soil inspection, I would probably put waived. Only on big pieces of land. I did sell a piece of land one time. It was right in the middle of Craig Road in a housing area, and across the street was shops. And it was a ½ acre, and it was fenced, and it was the only parcel in there that didn't have something built on it. And my buyer insisted that we have a soil inspection because he didn't know what it might have been stored there during World War II. Was it World War II when they were building Nellis? So he wanted it, he paid for it. Septic pumping, I'd ask the seller to do that. This is brand new. elevator. There's a number of very expensive homes that have elevators, and you might want to be sure it's in working order before you get in there and try to go to the next floor. So, mock's nix on that. If it has an elevator, I just ask the seller when was the last time it was inspected. If he said, well, I've never had it inspected, then I'd ask him to get it inspected. Well inspection, quantity and quality, there are a number of homes way out in the northwest that are little cul-de-sacs off another road, and there's 4 homes on each cul-de-sac, and they're all on like a half acre, they're all 1 story, they're all very nice. They're on a well. Now, generally speaking, these people have a well agreement, and they get it inspected by the health. They pay to use the well, and they get it inspected by the health department. I would first ask if they have any paperwork, any recent paperwork, and then I'd have them pay for it. It's up to you. Wood burning device chimney inspection. So here's the thing. I think it was around 1990, 91. It was after the lakes was built. Las Vegas was having real problems with smog inversion over the valley in the winter. You could drive up in Summerlin and look back to Las Vegas and you could just see smog all the way across the city. So they passed an ordinance that there could be no wood burning devices. But in areas that are older than that, there are a lot of them that have wood in their fireplace. There are some older homes that have wood burning stoves. And ask your buyer, do you want it inspected? The home inspector is not going to do that. You're going to have somebody else come in and do it. So I would either pay for it or ask the seller to pay for it or whatever. But if it's a newer home like built in 2000, there is no wood burning device. It's all gas. Septic inspection, to me, septic lid removal, septic pumping, and septic inspection go together. Structural inspection, seller could care less. Home inspectors checks the structure. Are there any cracks in the drywall? Any cracks outside in the stucco? So that's a buyer's expense. And the reason I kind of went through all of those, because you probably know all those, is I had an agent, I don't know what he was thinking, because most people just put home inspection paid by the buyer, and then on all this other stuff they put waived, or NA. But it all kind of goes together. But this agent had a listing, he called me up, hysterical. These people are asking to have 5 inspections, and my seller is not going to put up with that. They're not going to put up with people coming through their home 5 times. I said, what are you talking about? He thought the home inspection, the pool inspection, the mechanical inspection, the mold inspection were all separate inspectors. You get one person, they can do it all. Any question on that? Okay. And then if you do discover a problem, there's a certification. Now we're going to go to escrow fees. I'm going to tell you what is typical. Typical escrow fees are split 50-50 buyer and seller, unless you have a VA buyer and they can't pay escrow fee. So in that case, the seller has to pay it all. Lender's title policy. Who's dealing with a lender? The buyer. So the buyer pays for it. Owner's title policy. Who's dealing with the owner? Yeah, the seller's the owner, so they pay for it. Real property transfer tax. This is what Clark County and the state of Nevada collect, $5.10 per thousand, so they can get some money from you when you sell your house. Now, I just found this out recently. I thought it was $5.10 per thousand for the state. It's not. Nye County, which is Pahrump, and we're selling a lot of property in Pahrump, is different. And I can't remember what it was or is, but it's something like $3.90 per thousand. But that's where the state takes your money. Okay, moving along, Persia. Thank you. Okay, closing fees. A lot of people screw up on this. Now, in the market that we're in, rarely are you seeing any buyers ask for closing costs. But this too will change. And prior to that, if your buyer asks for closing costs, seller will contribute percent of, that's supposed to be a dollar sign. It's a dollar sign on my form. Huh?
Well, it could be like 3%, but we just put the price down there.
Well, yeah, on my form that I just printed out, maybe this is, it's dated 2/21, which is the form you're supposed to use, February 21. Mine says, oh no, closing. Okay, never mind. It's got a percentage. That's new. It used to always be a dollar sign.
Makes more
Okay.
sense because then it corresponds to the purchase price. Because if that changes, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Okay, so including or excluding costs. So let's just say your buyer needs $5,000 in closing costs to close the deal. Well, if they're getting an FHA or a VA loan, there's some piddly little fees that the lender is going to charge the seller. They're so piddly, I call them garbage fees. They're not even on the estimated net proceeds sheet. And so does this $5,000 include those fees or exclude? Always check excluding, because let's just say there was $400 worth of fees that the lender's going to charge the seller, and you've asked for $5,000, you're only getting $4,600, and your buyer's going to have to come up with the additional $400. So always check excluding. Any question on that? Maybe I'm on the wrong page. Hold on. What page are we on? We're on 5, and this is page 5, but this is different than what mine says. Okay, 10 common interest communities right here, which this is where everybody screws up, which I will probably slip and say HOA, because it was only a couple legislative sessions ago that the legislature changed it. It used to be HOA, and now it's CIC, Common Interest Community. And it says, who's paying the following? The seller, the buyer, 50-50, whatever. CIC demand. That's what the title company sends over to the HOA to say, is the seller current on his fees? And this is all about the seller, and are they current with their assessments for their homeowners association? So really that is a seller's expense. CIC capital contribution. Now, a lot of times HOAs will impound 2 or 3 months worth of HOA fees in case your coupon book doesn't catch up with you, or in case you miss a payment, they've got the money, or maybe they're like in Sun City, this is different, but in Sun City there's the NORA fee, the new owner's reserve account. Every new homeowner pays that, but it's a very similar fee. So this would be the buyer's expense because it's going to cover his portion. CIC transfer and setup fee. So here's what happens in my association. So I'm leaving and the HOA just hits delete for my account, and that's all they do. But if you're moving into my house, my HOA wants to know, the name of all the adults living in the property, the name and ages of all the children. They want to know pets, how many dogs, how many cats. They want to know every pet in the household. They also want to know the make, model, and year and license plate number of every car that you drive. Oh, and by the way, they also require a copy of your insurance on the car. So they have to go to a lot of work for the new buyer, whereas for the seller, they just hit delete. So that is really a buyer's expense. Okay, going down, next page. That's okay, Persia. All right. Delivery and possession. Okay. So here's the thing. It says in here, seller agrees to leave the property in neat and orderly, broom clean condition. Broom clean does not mean I had professional cleaners come in and clean it. Broom clean does not mean that I had all the carpets shampooed. So, if your buyer wants that, ask for that in another section that we'll get to in a minute. But this just says broom clean. And delivery and possession is close of escrow, or if the buyer's going to give the seller a week to vacate, or 2 weeks, or 30 days, that date would go in there. Any questions on that? Okay. Next page, please, Persia. Nothing on this page, so go to page 8. Nothing on this page. Page 9, additional terms. This is where you would write in, home to be professionally cleaned after move out, carpets to be shampooed, whatever you want. And if I'm asking my seller to pay some closing costs for the buyer, I always write that in there because there are a lot of lazy agents that'll go, oh, I got 2 offers on your property. I'm going to email them to you and give me a call back and tell me what you think. Wrong. Don't ever do that. Go explain it to your seller. But if somebody does that, the seller going through the contract may miss the fact that I'm asking the seller to pay closing costs for my buyer. So I always write it in there. And if I'm asking for something really weird and I can't think of anything right now, I would write that in there too. So whatever you want to put in there, and that basically is that. There's one other thing that I want to address when you're working with buyers, and it's not really in the contract, but Nevada is an escrow closing state. And then there are table closing states. And there are more table closing states than there are title states. And this has happened more than once. If you have an experienced buyer coming in from another state, ask them, are you a table closing state? Or did you buy your last house through escrow? Because I'm going to tell you a true story that happened to me. I had this older couple moving from Wisconsin. Whole family lived in Wisconsin, but they decided they could not handle the weather in Wisconsin anymore. So they came to Nevada, not knowing a soul in Las Vegas. And we found them a house. And I've explained to them, I don't know why I thought of it, but I did. I said, is Wisconsin a table closing state? And in a table closing state, and I've owned a house in a table closing state, you've got this huge table, you're in this room, and at this table you have the buyer, the buyer's agent, and the buyer's attorney. You have the seller's agent, the seller's attorney. You have the person from the title company. And in most of these table closing states, title and escrow are different. So you have the title company, you have a representative from the escrow company, and then you have someone from the bank that's giving them the loan. And you just shuffle all these papers around the table. You have no idea what you've signed. They're going, okay, you need to sign this one, and you need to sign this one. And then, by the way, you have somebody sitting over the corner checking to be sure everybody's signatures are there. So when it's all done, the buyer presents their money. When I did it, it was cashier's check. There was no wiring of funds. And then the seller gives the buyer the keys, and we're done. You walk out a homeowner and you have the keys in your hand. So I've gone to great lengths to explain the difference. So we show up at title, and we go through everything, and we're finished, and the escrow officer very nicely says, I need your money. And the husband, who was a grumpy old guy anyway, said, I need my keys. She said, I don't have your keys. He said, well, you're not getting money if I don't get keys. And she said, but I don't have the keys. And the wife interrupts, and she says, honey, remember Janet explained that to us, and that's not the way they do it here because they're a different kind of state than Wisconsin. He was so out of control, his wife hauled him out of the office and took him outside. Now, I wasn't worried about him leaving because we were in the same car, but we sat there a good 15 minutes before they came back in, and he came back in, and he handed over his check, and I said, she will call me the minute the title has been recorded in your name, and I will call you, and then I will go get the keys. And he was happy. So just keep that in mind, because I know we're dealing with a lot of people moving in from out of state. And basically, those are the main things I'm seeing where people are making mistakes. Any questions?
By the
John.
same token, I had a seller recently who refused to give up the keys even though it had closed because the money had not gone into her account yet. I
Oh.
didn't get my money, I'm not giving my keys. So, you know, same kind of mentality there. And they told her it'll take at least one business day to get you. They told her that at the closing table, but you know, it was just so they're out there. You have to be. People get very, very funny.
That's true.
Call me on Saturday saying my client hasn't seen the money in their account yet. And I'm like, it's Saturday, and so I said, well, did you call? And she's like, well, the escrow company's closed. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I said, but they're not supposed to see their money yet. And so, but she wasn't going to believe me because she was like, she knew I was a newer agent because she had said to me, is this your first closing? And I was like, no, but you know, whatever. So I sent an email to the escrow company and said, you know, the sellers are saying they haven't seen their money yet. And she's like, the sellers never see their money till the day after, you know, it's recorded. But I just figured I didn't want to be showing up. I didn't want her to think I was trying to show her up, so I just didn't.
They missed that concept of the middleman, the
Right.
escrow, and for them to turn around the cash. That just goes over their head.
Particularly if they've bought homes
Older people.
in other states like East Coast, they're all table closing. Todd?
Janet, this reason, and the reason of missing a close date is why I suggest never closing on a Friday. So when you write a close of escrow date, always make it a Thursday, not a Friday. Because of that reason, your seller's not gonna get their money, and they're gonna be complaining all weekend long. And if for some reason it didn't close on Friday, and the buyers have already taken work off to move all weekend, and they're not gonna be able to move until Monday, they're gonna be kind of frustrated as well. So if you close on Thursday and you miss it, you're gonna be able to catch it on Friday and still be able to get them in over the weekend. So closing on a Friday is just a bad idea because.
Well, I will tell you, I was at an NAR conference, and the state of Arkansas has declared that there will be no Friday closings, Todd. They don't close on Friday. And one of the main reasons for that, other than having your ticked off buyers who can't move, is because if there is a problem now that wire fraud is just running rampant, and if there's a problem with the wire on a Friday afternoon, well, you can basically kiss your money goodbye, because if wire fraud is involved, you need to contact the FBI and you need to contact the bank immediately. And you may not get anybody late on a Friday afternoon, and you can't get a hold of anybody till Monday. But also, the other thing Arkansas did was that they have an insurance policy that the buyer must buy. The buyer, no closings on Friday, the buyer must buy this insurance policy, and it protects everybody in the transaction from wire fraud. Everybody involved is protected with this insurance policy. And guess how much it costs? $25. So, okay, well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And go on with your day.